Why he asked for me? I don't know him that well. Fesco's eyes drifted toward the house. Says he's being set up by Internal Affairs. Doesn't trust anybody connected to the Baltimore PD. He knew you'd gone over to the FBI recently. Would you tell him I'm here? But also tell him I'm being briefed now. I want to hear how he sounds before I talk to him. Fesco nodded. Then he called the house. It rang several times before it was picked up. Agent Cross has just arrived, Dennis. He's being briefed now, said Fesco.
Like hell he is. Get him on the hook. Don't make me shoot in here. I'm getting close to creating a real problem. Get him, now.
Fesco handed me the phone and I spoke into it. Dennis, this is Alex Cross. I'm here. I did want to be briefed first.
This really Alex Cross?
Coulter asked, sounding surprised. Yeah, it's me. I don't know too many of the details, except you say you're being set up by Internal Affairs.
I don't just say it. I am being set up. I can tell you why, too. I'll brief you. That way, you'll hear it straight.
All right, I told him. I'm on your side so far. I know you, Dennis. I don't know the Baltimore Internal Affairs. Coulter cut me off.
I want you to listen to me. Don't talk. Just hear me out.
All right, I said. I'm listening. I sat down on the ground behind a Baltimore PD cruiser, and I got ready to listen to the armed man who was supposedly holding a dozen of his family members hostage. Jesus. I was back on the job again.
They want to kill me. The Baltimore PD has me in its crosshairs.
Chapter 7. Pop! I jumped. Someone had pulled open a can of soda and tapped me on the shoulder with it. I looked up to see none other than Ned Mahoney, head of the hostage rescue team at Quantico, handing me a Diet Coke, caffeine-free. I had taken a couple of classes from him during orientation. He knew his stuff. In the classroom, anyway. Welcome to my private hell, I said. What am I doing here, by the way? Mahoney winked and dropped down beside me. You're a rising star. Or maybe a risen star. You know the drill. Get him talking, keep him talking, said Mahoney. We hear you're real good at this. So what are you doing here, I asked. What do you think? Watching, studying your technique. You're the director's boy, right? He thinks you're gifted. I took a sip of soda, then pressed the cold can to my forehead. Hell of an introduction to the FBI for the FNG. Dennis, who wants to kill you? I spoke into the cell phone again. Tell me all you can about what's going on here. I also need to ask about your family. Is everybody all right in there? Coulter bristled.
Hey, let's not waste time on a lot of bullshit negotiation crap. I'm about to be executed. That's what this is. Make no mistake. Look around you, man. It's an execution.
I couldn't see Coulter, but I remembered him. No more than 5'8", goatee, hip, always cracking a wise-ass joke. Very tough. All in all, a small man complex. He began to tell his story, his side of things, and unfortunately I had no idea what to make of what he was spilling out. According to Coulter, detectives in the Baltimore PD had been involved in large drug payoffs. Even he didn't know how many, but the number was high. He'd blown the whistle. The next thing he knew, his house was surrounded by cops. Then Coulter dropped the bomb.
I was getting kickbacks, too. Somebody turned me into Internal Affairs, one of my partners.
Why would a partner do that?
Because I got greedy. I went for a bigger piece of the pie. Thought I had my partners by the short hairs. They didn't see it that way.
How did you have them by the short hairs?
I told my partners that I had copies of records. Who had been paid what? A couple of years' worth of records.
Now we were getting somewhere. Do you? I asked. Coulter hesitated. Why was that? Either he did or he didn't.
I might. They sure think I do. So now they're going to put me down. They were coming for me today. I'm not supposed to leave this house alive.
I was trying to listen for other voices or sounds in the house while he kept talking. I didn't hear any. Was anybody else still alive in there? What had Coulter done to his family? How desperate was he? I looked at Ned Mahoney and shrugged my shoulders. I really wasn't sure whether Coulter was telling the truth or if he was just a street cop who'd gone loco. Mahoney looked skeptical, too. He had a don't-ask-me look on his face. I had to go somewhere else for guidance. "So what do we do now?" I asked Coulter. He sniffed out a laugh.
Oh, I was hoping you'd have an idea. You're supposed to be the hot shot, right?
That's what everybody keeps saying. Chapter 8. The situation in Baltimore didn't get any better during the next several hours. If anything, it got worse. It was impossible to keep the neighbors from wandering out on their porches to watch the standoff in progress. Then the Baltimore PD began to evacuate the Coulters' neighbors, many of whom were also the Coulters' friends. A temporary shelter had been set up at the nearby Garrett Heights Elementary School. It reminded everyone that there were probably children trapped inside Detective Coulter's house. His family. Jesus. I looked around and shook my head in dismay as I saw an awful lot of Baltimore police, including SWAT, and also the hostage rescue team from Quantico. A swarm of crazy-eyed spectators was pushing and shoving outside the barricades, some of them rooting for cops to be shot. Any cop would do. I stood up and cautiously made my way over to a group of officers waiting behind an emergency rescue van. I didn't need to be told that they didn't appreciate interference from the feds. I hadn't either when I was on the D.C. police force. I addressed Captain Stockton James Sheehan, whom I'd spoken to briefly when I arrived. "What do you think? Where do we go with this?" "Has he agreed to let anybody out?" Sheehan asked. "That's the first question." I shook my head. "He won't even talk about his family. Won't confirm or deny that they're in the house." Sheehan asked, "Well, what is he talking about?" I shared some of what I'd been told by Coulter, but not everything. How could I? I left out that he'd sworn Baltimore cops were involved in a large-scale drug scheme, and more devastating, that he had records that would incriminate them. Stockton Sheehan listened, and then he offered, "Either he lets go of some of the hostages or we have to go in and get him. He's not going to gun down his own family." "He says he will. That's the threat." Sheehan shook his head. "I'm willing to take the risk. We go in when it gets dark. You know this should be our call." I nodded, without agreeing or disagreeing. Then I walked away from the others. It looked as if we might have another half hour of light. I didn't like to think about what would happen once darkness came. I called Coulter again. He picked up right away. "I have an idea," I told him. "I think it's your best shot." I didn't tell Coulter, but I also thought it was his only shot.
"So tell me what you're thinking."
I told Dennis Coulter my plan. 10 minutes later, Captain Sheehan was shouting in my face that I was worse than any motherfucking FBI asshole he had ever dealt with. I guess I was a fast learner. Maybe I didn't even need the orientation classes I was missing at Quantico. Not if I was already the king of the FBI assholes. Which was one way of saying that the Baltimore police didn't approve of my plan to defuse the situation with Detective Coulter. Even Mahoney had doubts. "I guess you're not real big on social and political correctness," he commented, when I told him Captain Sheehan's reaction. "Thought I was. Guess I'm not. Hope this works." "It better work." "I think they want to kill him, Ned." "Yeah, so do I. I think we're making the right call." "We?" I asked. Mahoney nodded. "I'm in this with you. No guts, no glory. It's a bureau thing." Minutes later, Mahoney and I watched the Baltimore police very reluctantly pull back from the house. I had told Sheehan I didn't want to see a single blue uniform or SWAT coverall anywhere around. The captain had his idea of what constituted acceptable risks, and I had mine. If they rushed the house, somebody would die for sure. If my idea failed, at least nobody would get hurt. Or at least nobody but me. I got back on the phone with Coulter. "The Baltimore police are out of sight," I told him. "I want you to come out, Dennis. Do it now." before they get a chance to think about what just happened. He didn't answer at first, then said,
I'm looking around. All it takes is one sniper with a night scope.
I knew he was right. Didn't matter. We had one chance. Come on out with your hostages, I told him. I'll meet you on the front steps myself. He didn't say anything more, and I was pretty sure I'd lost him. I focused on the front door of the house and tried not to think about people dying here. Come on, Coulter. Use your head. This is the best deal you're going to get. He finally spoke again.
You sure about this? 'Cause I'm not. I think you might be crazy.
I'm sure.
All right. I'm coming out,
he said. Then he added,
This is on you.
I turned to Mahoney. Let's get a protective vest on him as soon as he hits the porch. Surround him with our guys. No Baltimore PD anywhere near him, no matter what they say. Can we do that? Brass balls. Mahoney grinned. Let's do it. Try anyway. Let me bring you out, Dennis. It's safer that way, I said into the cell. I'm coming to you now. But Coulter had his own plan. Jesus, he was already on his front porch. He had both hands raised high over his head, clearly unarmed, vulnerable as hell. I was afraid I'd hear shots and he'd go down in a heap. I started to run forward. Then half a dozen HRT guys were all over him, shielding Coulter from harm. They rushed him to a waiting van. We got him inside the truck. Subject is safe. I heard the report from HRT. We're getting him the hell out of here. I turned back toward the house. What about the family? Where were they? Had he made up his story? Oh, Christ, what had Dennis Coulter done? Then I saw the family walking single file out of the house. It was an incredible scene. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. An old man in a white shirt, black trousers and suspenders. An elderly woman in a blowing pink dress and high heels. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Two small girls in white party dresses. A couple of middle-aged women holding hands. Three males in their 20s, each of them with their hands up. A woman with two little babies. Several of the adults were carrying cardboard boxes. I figured I knew what was in them. Yeah, I knew. The records, the proof, the evidence. Detective Dennis Coulter had been telling the truth after all. His family had believed him. They had just saved his life. I felt Ned Mahoney pat my back hard. Nice job. Really good job. I laughed and said, for an FNG. That was a test, wasn't it? I really couldn't say, Mahoney said. But if it was, you aced it. Chapter 9. A test? Jesus. Is that why I was sent to Baltimore? I hope to hell not. I got home late that night. Too late. I was glad that no one would be up to see me, especially Nana. I couldn't handle one of her soul-piercing, disapproving looks right now. I needed a beer, and then I wanted to go to bed. Sleep if I could. I slipped quietly inside the house, not wanting to wake anyone. Not a sound except for the tiniest electric hum that came from somewhere. I was planning to call Jamila as soon as I got upstairs. I was missing her like the plague. Rosie the cat slid by and rubbed against my leg. "Hello, Red," I whispered. "I did good today." Then I heard a cry. I hurried up the front stairs toward little Alex's room. He was up and working himself into a good wail. I didn't want Nana or one of the other kids to have to get up and tend to him. Besides, I hadn't seen my boy since early that morning, and I wanted to give him a snuggle. I missed his little face. When I peeked into his room, he was sitting up, and he seemed surprised to see it was me. Then he smiled and clapped his hands. "Oh, boy, Daddy's on the case. Daddy's the biggest sucker in the house." "What are you doing up, pup?" "It's late," I said. Alex's bed is a low riser that I made myself. There are protected